AstroPsych 400 Podcasts for Sleep. It's time to go to sleep now. Time to surround yourself with positive vibes. You are who you are. Being weird is not a crime. Is there only one type of intelligence? Or can intelligence be measured in different ways? Or perhaps is there no true way to find out what intelligence is or how intelligent another person is? I'm reminded of a discussion that I heard during the intermission of a game that we had when we were kids, and we were sitting around during the halftime, and someone was talking about how a high IQ is equivalent to high intelligence. And I remember one of the other members on our team was named Michael, and he said, IQ is not how smart you are. Your IQ is your ability to learn. So I think that that is very insightful. No matter how valuable someone thinks the IQ test is, it is not everything. It is just rating somebody's ability to learn as opposed to intelligence. Some people believe that there are different types of intelligence out there, such as creative intelligence, as well as people who are orally intelligent, those who learn by listening, and then there are those who learn by reading, and then there is musical intelligence, and then there is analytical intelligence. Some people are very good at problem solving. Some people really excel in math or in science, but they do not necessarily excel in creative projects. And then you can also factor in competency and mental toughness. Somebody might be extremely good at word problems in a math class, but if they were actually faced with a situation outside of the classroom, they might not be able to solve the problem. This can also be complicated when someone has to deal with social intelligence. Again, someone can be very good with math problems, but perhaps they will not succeed when they are trying to interpret the behaviors of other people, because they're so focused on analytical thinking, they're so focused on mathematical logic, that they don't recognize that a human being does not follow the laws of logic, and people don't always behave in a certain way. I had to read an essay once years ago, and the assignment was to give a response to it, and it was talking all about human behavior, and I don't remember the name of the writer, and I don't remember all the details of the essay, but I do remember what I said in response, and that was that I think this writer doesn't understand reality. And the reason why I said that, without remembering any of the details, is that he was talking about how people are just being treated as logical, analytical forms of computation, that he was treating people as just those who are going to give the same result every time. Like if you hit backspace on your keyboard, then it goes back one space. But human beings are not like that because of consciousness. And when we were in physical anthropology class, somebody was talking about this in regards to how consciousness functions. And we talked about tribal societies, and one student said that an object at rest will stay at rest. And then another student responded to her by saying, that law eliminates consciousness. And I thought, wow, that is amazing that he can recall that type of particular detail just off the top of his head, and I've always held on to that when I hear other people talking about the laws of physics. An object at rest will stay at rest, and you say that law eliminates consciousness. But what she said in retaliation, in a polite retaliation that is that, well, if you don't have to get up and go out and get your food, then you have fewer opportunities to experience a conflict. If you don't have to get up and go out to get your fresh water, then you have fewer opportunities to experience a conflict. Or how about a problem, even not a conflict with other people, if you're not constantly searching through unknown terrain, you won't trip over that log that you didn't see and fall down the hill and have a broken leg and be unable to move and then succumb to the elements. So I think that it's the boring answer of both of them had a point. But the whole concept of intelligence is that we learn in different ways. And there was a very famous saying out there. By saying, I mean it's something that they used in inspirational exercises when they would share info about how people learn. They would say that someone can remember 10% of what they have read, and they can remember 20% of what they hear. But strangely, interestingly, and fascinatingly, someone can remember 80% of what they have taught. And I think that that is so amazingly true because, firstly, you have the opportunity to experience the information in different forms. For example, you might be reading about a subject, and then if you tell the person about it, you are experiencing it with sound. You're hearing yourself talk and saying the words out loud, but your brain also has to process and remember it, and there are different types of instincts that people are experiencing. 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, and 80% of what we are taught. And I think that when it comes to this type of learning, there is quite a debate about how they use the word intelligence with creative intelligence, social intelligence, musical intelligence, mathematical and analytical intelligence. And a person whom I talk about very frequently on AstroPsych 400 is Dr. Jordan Peterson, because I spent a couple years being entrenched in his material, and he said that perhaps these are not true forms of intelligence, such as creative intelligence or musical intelligence. They are talents. We have a word for that, like someone is very talented with types of creativity, but a lot of people think that being talented is a form of intelligence. I remember watching a discussion about education once, and there were two people who were debating whether or not we should have gender separation in schools, where you could have three different classes, one for boys, one for girls, and the third class would be for people who wanted to be in mixed or multi-gender classrooms, like with any type of student could attend if they wanted to. And it was a very interesting debate because there were two people that were presenting, and one of them was an amazing public speaker where I could comprehend everything that she was saying, and the other person was someone whom I would space out immediately. She was talking about education, and perhaps she was an educator herself, but she was not a trained broadcaster, so when she would start talking, I would just space out and not hear a word. Some people just have that particular effect, no matter how articulate they are. But with the woman who was talking in a very articulate and easy to understand way, she was in favor of having separate gender classes in elementary school, junior high, and high school for the following reason. She said that our brains function differently between the male brain and the female brain. And a preschool girl can learn words twice as fast as a preschool boy, but a preschool boy can throw a ball twice as accurately as a preschool girl. But our school system doesn't recognize throwing a ball as a form of intelligence, but it is, because it's all about neurological functioning, it's all about the brain. And if you were to have separate gender classes, then you could have hands-on activities for the boys, and you could have more thoughtful activities for the girls that are dealing with abstraction. And perhaps you've heard the expression that boys are interested in things and girls are interested in people. And in fact, it's mostly represented in reverse. They say that girls are interested in people and boys are interested in things. That's why so many women go into nursing and so many men go into engineering, even when they talk about those statistics from Scandinavia, particularly a country like Sweden, when they have a very fair society and women enter nursing 20 to 1 compared to men, and with engineering, men enter 20 to 1 compared to women. So it could be that same form of neurological functioning and the same age-old idea that girls are interested in people and boys are interested in things. On the notion of different genders and the concept of intelligence, I'm reminded of a conversation that I had years ago when a female classmate of mine from the university once said that she thought that women were more creative than men. And as a male who thought that I was rather creative myself, I was very surprised to hear that, because so many of the writers that I had followed growing up were men. We're talking about J.R.R. Tolkien and David Eddings and countless other people, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even, very creative individuals. And yet I thought that I didn't know if she had the justification to say that women are more creative than men. But then, over time, the more I would read about psychology, I would find that that statement seemed to be somewhat consistent with the types of neurological functioning that women experience, that women are definitely more geared toward thoughtfulness. And I love talking about Dr. Helen Fisher in The Anatomy of Love, which states that there are 4 governing components of brain chemistry: dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen. Dopamine-centered people do things to fuel their own excitement. Serotonin-centered individuals do things to fuel a collective excitement. Testosterone-centered individuals are assertive. And estrogen-centered individuals are imaginative and introspective and thoughtful. So apparently, even if a male is estrogen-centered, I'm a male and I'm estrogen-centered, meaning it's the governing component of brain chemistry. It's a guiding force in your decision-making. And it appears that there does appear to be a correlation between traditionally feminine ways of thinking and creativity. And I was really quite surprised once I heard women talking about sexual fantasies, because I used to listen to the show on the Big Mood channel, which is available here on YouTube, and it was a very open and honest discussion show where women share all their secrets. And what I said about it in the past is that if you want to know how a woman thinks, you should listen to that program, because they openly tell you, or even if you don't care about how a woman thinks, if you're like a man and you aren't interested in the ways that women think, well, how are they operating in a relationship? Because that show openly told you. And when they did an episode on sexual fantasies, and women were just sharing their idea of a sexual fantasy, I was so unbelievably surprised to learn that their fantasies were so much more detailed than my own, and to the very, very specific and precise, and stuff that I never would have thought of, even if it wasn't extremely sexual in nature. It's just more like they want to be with a man who's going to buy them a Gucci bag or something like that. But the way that they want to go about it, all types of adjectives and all types of particularities, perhaps even though I didn't want to admit it, there is some evidence to suggest that women can be more creative than men. Now, there's some people out there who want to exploit these types of thinking, such as the governing components of brain chemistry, about how testosterone-centered people are more assertive and estrogen-centered people are more introspective and thoughtful. And this can even lead to a school of thought called ecofeminism, which suggests that testosterone is a destructive force because it leads to destructive behavior, impulse control, and people acting out overly assertive decisions that they would not act out if they were estrogen-centered. And I think that gets to the point where they are simply abusing the system because they're trying to further a particular agenda. But on the notion of intelligence, have you ever felt like you didn't completely understand something, but you still thought that there was some type of intelligence in you? There was this one political cartoon that was done that featured a bunch of different animals, all the animals from the Serengeti. You had the monkey and the zebra and the lion, and the they were all in a row, even more animals than that. Maybe a hippo was there too. And it said that our task for today, maybe it actually said the word test. Our test for today is to climb a tree. And the title of that political cartoon was Our Educational System, meaning that our system doesn't encourage all types of behavior, or it doesn't reward all types of intelligence, or if you want to call them talents or competencies, those are not rewarded by the educational system. And I really began to think about this during the years of kindergarten and elementary school, and I thought that if you are not an artist, people will look down on you. And I felt that way because I have terrible handwriting. I really did not stay inside the lines during coloring, and I would even color too darkly because it felt nice to just make everything so much darker than it had to be in the feel of the crayon against the paper. But once I got to the third grade, actually, they gave us these colored pens, and I found that it was so much easier to stay in the lines of a coloring book when I was using a pen, such as a ballpoint pen. And that is kind of beside the point, but the whole reason I'm sharing this is if you are not an artist and you're not good at drawing or painting, you will not excel at a lot of the tasks that have been put forward in the pre-K through 12 system. But that is something that simply people have to encounter and people have to deal with. If they had only music classes, or they had more music classes than they do, some people would excel in music and other people would not. So there are different types of learning and there are different ways that we can learn. And another thing that I think is very interesting is the notion of creativity, talking about how there is a spike in creativity between the ages of 16 to 25, especially for males, and it is completely consistent with the spike in deviant behavior. And one of the reasons why is people who are creative are always trying to put themselves outside the realm of examinable parameters, and I can only gather that that includes the law, so those all seem to make sense. Plus, one thing that almost nobody wants to talk about outside the world of creativity is that between the ages of 18 and 22, there is a very big hormonal change that a lot of us experience. A lot of people have a lot of up and down emotions, and it is almost never talked about. This could be connected to testosterone, this could be connected to other forms of the way that the brain processes neurotransmitters such as serotonin and norepinephrine, and it can also be towards how people deal with the conflicts of adulthood. But I noticed very major hormonal changes in people from the ages of 18 to 22, especially males, but even females to a certain extent. And the odd thing about that is the college age, so people are often on their own or they're living away from their parents, and then they're experiencing a bunch of hormonal changes. And I have never once heard about a single support system designed to allow people to deal with that. And I think that all stems back to something that is completely outside of the intelligence spectrum, and that is mental awareness. Where I was listening to somebody talk about this at the White House once, actually, and they said we need to differentiate between mental illness and mental awareness. Mental awareness, like how do people respond to situations when they are frustrated or sad or angry, and they need to learn how to deal with those types of behaviors, because the support system was always focusing on mental illness, telling people they need counseling or they need medication, but the medications that they're talking about are for things such as clinical depression, not things such as just feeling frustrated, and even if they do have resources, they aren't well distributed and they aren't communicated through the specific sensitivity that people need to understand. And I have to quote Neil deGrasse Tyson for that particular angle, because he said that education is communicating through a specific sensitivity so that the listener will understand you or the student will understand you. And I think that heavily is connected to intelligence. There was another thinker years ago named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz who talked about how if the idea can exist in the mind, then it can also exist in the external world. Therefore, even if somebody has a difficulty with learning, then they could learn under these specific conditions. And I think that that's what Leibniz was talking about. If there is a will, there is a way. It's perhaps another way of expressing it. But some people think that academic performance is everything when it comes to intelligence, that someone has a high IQ and then they will be a good performer in school and they will succeed. But on the notion of creativity, another thing from Jordan Peterson's lectures is that there is no positive correlation to intelligence, creativity, and academic performance. Anything, there is a negative correlation between creativity and academic performance, for the same reason that there is deviant behavior. Creative people are always trying to put themselves outside the realm of examinable parameters, and simply ties back to the need for differentiating between and among the other types of intelligence. For example, I knew someone growing up who was very good at math and science because he was able to figure out the answers, and he never showed his work on the test, and he always got deductions from the teachers. They would lower his grade because they said, show your work, and he wouldn't do it. And I would even try to tell him, you're supposed to show your work so they can see if you are actually understanding it and you're not cheating or just guessing randomly. But he didn't want to do that. He just said, I don't have to show my work. I can do this stuff so easily. And he excelled at math and he excelled at science, and he also excelled at literature because he was very good at reading. He had a high reading level. But when it came to any form of creativity, he had absolutely nothing to share. When it came to social activities, he really did not excel in them. Anything that required human interaction or just being sociable, he wasn't able to succeed. And I remember one of the most peculiar things about this person was he would never remember cars by their physical appearance. He would remember the car by the license plate number. And he was once walking out of a store and he was walking toward a car, and I said, hey, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just getting something from my car. And I said, no, your car has 4 doors. That car has only 2. Your car is parked over there. Because he didn't remember the cars by their physical appearances, and it would be my car, his parents' cars. He would remember them by the license plate numbers. And I had a conversation with somebody about this type of behavior, and what they said was, maybe social intelligence is even more important than academic performance, or maybe social intelligence is even more important than IQ, because it allows you to deal with real-world situations. But another example of demonstrating how there are different types of intelligence in the world relates to success outside of the classroom and involving types of performance in the business world. I was watching a video from a dating coach where he said that somebody wrote into his channel saying that he was 25 years old and he earned $250,000 a year. He had a lot of success early on and he was able to buy 2 houses, but in his love life, he was not getting anywhere. He wasn't succeeding in romantic relationships, and he had always heard that people care so much about money, or they care about success, they care about the ability to succeed across all possible dominance hierarchies, but simply he was unable to do so. And I think that stems from the fact that He knew how to succeed. He knew how certain systems work, but he didn't have that type of social intelligence to understand how human behavior worked. And it's not to say that I have an amazingly high kind of social intelligence. Perhaps this guy was even more socially intelligent than I am. But I am someone who is able to say that there are types of differences. I once knew somebody who didn't want to talk about social intelligence. She wanted to talk about emotional intelligence, EQ. That's what she was all about, EQ. She would always say that someone could have a high IQ or a high EQ. And about this person, her belief system was that she could say whatever she wanted, she could do whatever she wanted, and she didn't care if people didn't like it. And I said, well, what about how other people feel? And her simple response was, if they don't like it, that's their problem. They have a low EQ. And I was so appalled by that because that is only looking at things by the middle ground, and it's not looking at it by the extremes. You can say whatever you want to people, and if they get mad about it, it's their problem. That's like walking up to a woman you don't know and calling her a slut, and then blaming her for being mad or getting her feelings hurt. That would be like walking up to an African American person and calling them the N-word, and then blaming them for getting mad when you said something that was intentionally offensive. Simply just saying that people have a low EQ, so it's their fault if they don't like what you're saying. That is a pure manipulation tactic. I can completely comprehend about how no matter what you do, people will criticize you, and the more that I begin to think about life, the more I notice that there are these types of underlying structures. Like, say, for example, when you make a comment and then somebody starts touching you in an odd way, putting a hand on your shoulder and saying no, instead of just telling you no, that they're adding in the physical gesture, and it's almost like a form of domineering behavior and domination itself. The person is trying to show that they have some type of control or power over you, and this can often come from people who are very humorous when they start making jokes about things. And it's the age-old saying of it all starts with a joke, about how they're joking around about being in charge, and then they just actually want to be in charge. They actually want to seize the throne and become the leader, the emperor of the group. People are very self-serving, but awareness of someone's own mental faculties perhaps could be a form of intelligence in itself. And I hope you are fast asleep now, and I hope that no matter what you are thinking, you will find something wonderful about yourself. I hope that no matter what you're thinking, the most intelligent form of your mind is now asleep in a floating semi-conscious state known as dreamland. Dreamland, what a wonderful place. I hope you are asleep until the dawn breaks. Unless you work the night shift, then I hope you are asleep until the sunset. It's time for you to remain fast asleep. Good night.